The morning sun peeked through the kitchen window, casting warm stripes of light across the breakfast table where 8-year-old Amara stood on her tiptoes, carefully pouring cereal into 2 bowls. Her little brother, nicknamed Sunny because of his bright smile, sat in his high chair, clapping his hands and giggling as he watched his big sister prepare their breakfast. Their mother rushed around the kitchen, her work badge swinging from her neck as she packed lunches and checked her schedule for the day. The familiar scent of coffee filled the air, mixing with the sweet aroma of the pancakes she'd managed to whip up despite the morning chaos. It was just another typical Wednesday in their cozy Atlanta home, where the summer heat was already beginning to creep in through the windows. "Mama, I already packed Sunny's diaper bag," Amara announced proudly, zipping up the blue bag decorated with little elephants. She'd been helping with her brother since the day he came home from the hospital, and at 8 years old, she took her role as big sister very seriously. She even arranged his favorite stuffed giraffe and spare clothes just the way her mother usually did. Their mother paused her morning rush to plant a kiss on Amara's forehead. "What would I do without my little helper?" she said, smoothing down Amara's freshly braided hair. The matching yellow beads at the ends of her braids clicked softly as she moved, making Sunny laugh and try to grab them whenever she bent down near his high chair. Through the window, they could see their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen, watering her prized roses, waving at them with her free hand when she spotted them. The neighborhood was coming to life. The sound of sprinklers, birds chirping, and cars starting filled the morning air. The weather report playing softly on the kitchen radio warned of another scorching summer day ahead. Amara helped clean Sunny's face after breakfast, giggling as he tried to dodge the washcloth while making airplane noises. "Come on, little brother," she said in her best grown-up voice. "We need to get you ready for daycare." Her mother watched them with a proud smile, taking a quick photo with her phone of this sweet morning moment. The wall clock showed 7:45 a.m., and their mother's eyes widened. "Oh, we need to get moving, kids." She quickly gathered her purse and keys, while Amara helped Sunny into his tiny shoes, the light-up ones he insisted on wearing every day. The little boy stomped his feet with each step, delighting in the flashing lights. As they prepared to leave, Amara went through her mental checklist, a habit she'd learned from her mother. Sunny's favorite snacks? Check. His sippy cup? Check. The special blanket he couldn't nap without? Double check. She felt proud knowing she was helping keep their morning routine running smoothly. None of them could have guessed that this ordinary Wednesday was about to become anything but ordinary. The morning sun continued to climb higher in the sky, the temperature slowly rising degree by degree, setting the stage for a day that would test their family in ways they never expected. The kitchen clock ticked steadily, counting down the moments until their lives would change forever. But for now, it was just another morning, filled with cereal, giggles, rush, and love. The kind of morning that usually blends into all the others in memory, except this one wouldn't. This one would be remembered forever, but they didn't know that yet. The morning was moving along like a speeding train, with everyone rushing to stay on schedule. Their mother grabbed her coffee tumbler while Amara helped Sunny down the front steps, holding his tiny hand as he conquered each step with determined little hops. The air was already thick with humidity, making their skin sticky even in the early morning shade. "Car time, sweetie," their mother called out, juggling her purse, the diaper bag, and her coffee as she pressed the key fob. The familiar beep-beep of the car unlocking echoed through their driveway. Amara watched as her mother opened the back door of their blue family sit-in, the one with the small dent in the bumper from that time they'd backed into a shopping cart. Sunny was in one of his wiggly moods that morning, squirming and giggling as their mother tried to buckle him into his car seat. "Look at the birdie," Amara said, pointing to distract him while their mother worked with the straps. It was their little morning routine. Amara the designated distractor, making funny faces and pointing out interesting things while their mother handled the buckles. The morning seemed to hold its breath for what happened next. Their mother, having finally secured Sunny in his seat, tossed her purse onto the passenger seat. Her phone slipped out, landing between the front seats with a soft thud. The car was still running, the air conditioning working hard to combat the Georgia heat that was already creeping in. "Just 1 second," their mother muttered, reaching for her phone. She closed Sonny's door first, something she'd done hundreds of times before. But this time was different. This time, the sound that followed wasn't just the usual soft thunk of the door closing. It was accompanied by that horrible click-click of all the doors automatically locking. For a moment, everything was still. Their mother's hand froze on the door handle, her eyes widening as realization dawned. The keys were still in the ignition. Her purse with the spare key was inside. And most terrifyingly of all, Sonny was strapped into his car seat, the engine running but the air conditioning already beginning to lose its battle against the climbing temperature. "No, no, no," their mother whispered, tugging frantically at the door handle. Sonny, not understanding what was happening, waved at them through the window, still thinking this was all part of their morning game. Amara felt her heart starting to race as she watched her mother's growing panic. The reality of the situation hit them in waves. The car was locked. The spare key was inside. Their phones were inside. And the sun was climbing higher in the sky, promising another scorching summer day. Through the window, they could see Sonny beginning to sense something was wrong, his little face starting to scrunch up in confusion. Their mother ran to the front door, trying all the handles, but each pull was met with the same unyielding resistance. She banged on the window, trying to keep her voice calm for Sonny's sake, but Amara could hear the fear creeping in. "It's okay, baby. Mama's going to get you out," she called through the glass. Neighbors began to notice the commotion. Mrs. Chen set down her watering can and hurried over as fast as her elderly legs would carry her. Mr. Turner from across the street emerged from his garage, tools in hand, ready to help. But as more people gathered, offering suggestions and support, the terrible truth became clear. They were running out of options, and more importantly, they were running out of time. The sun continued its relentless climb, and inside the car, despite the running air conditioning, the temperature was already beginning to rise. Sonny's confused waves had turned to worried looks, and tears were beginning to well up in his big brown eyes. Amara stood there, her mind racing, watching as the adults around them tried door after door, suggestion after suggestion, while her little brother remained trapped inside. What had started as an ordinary morning had turned into their worst nightmare in the blink of an eye. But sometimes the worst moments bring out the best in people, and in this case, it would bring out something extraordinary in a little girl who refused to give up on her brother. Time seemed to move like thick honey as more neighbors gathered around the locked car. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, turning the vehicle into a greenhouse. Inside, little Sonny had stopped waving and started crying, his face getting redder by the minute. Their mother's hands trembled as she pressed against the window, trying to comfort him through the glass. "Has anyone called 911?" Mr. Turner asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Mrs. Chen was already on her phone, speaking quickly to the dispatcher. Yes, a baby locked in car. No, engine is running, but it's getting very hot. Corner of Pine Street and Oak Avenue." Her usual calm voice shook with worry. Amara watched as her mother paced around the car, checking every door again and again, as if one might magically open. The look in her mother's eyes scared her more than anything. She'd never seen such fear there before. "Sweetie, it's okay," her mother called to Sonny, pressing her palm against the window. "Mama's right here. We're going to get you out." Someone suggested breaking the window, but others quickly pointed out the dangers of shattered glass with a baby inside. Mr. Turner ran home to get his toolbox, convinced he could somehow pick the lock. Mrs. Chen brought out a cold bottle of water, but they could only watch helplessly as Sonny grew more distressed inside the car. The neighbors formed a small crowd now, everyone offering suggestions and support. "My cousin works at a car dealership," one said, already dialing their phone. Maybe they can send someone. Another neighbor wondered if a coat hanger could help, while someone else Googled how to unlock a car without keys on their phone. Through the windows, they could see Sonny's face getting redder, his cries becoming more desperate. The air conditioning was still running, but in the intense heat, it wasn't enough. Their mother had started crying too, though she tried to hide it, still talking softly to Sonny through the glass. "Just a little longer, baby. Help is coming. Mama's right here." The sound of distant sirens brought a moment of hope, but then someone's phone showed the traffic report. A major accident had blocked the main road to their neighborhood. The emergency vehicles would have to take a longer route, adding precious minutes to their arrival time. Amara felt her heart pounding as she watched her little brother's distress. The stuffed giraffe he loved so much had fallen just out of his reach, and he was stretching his little arms toward it, crying harder. She could see drops of sweat rolling down his face, his curly hair sticking to his forehead. The car's windows had fogged up from Sonny's crying, and the difference between the interior and exterior temperatures. Their mother used her sleeve to wipe a clear spot on the window, desperately trying to maintain visual contact with her baby. The fear in her voice grew with each passing minute. "Please hurry," she whispered to no one in particular. "Please." Mr. Turner returned with his tools, but after a few careful attempts, he stepped back, shaking his head. "I don't want to damage the lock and make things worse," he admitted, his usual confident tone replaced with worry. More neighbors had arrived, some bringing umbrellas to create shade around the car, others calling every locksmith in the phone book. Amara stood slightly apart from the crowd, her eyes fixed on the car. While the adults rushed around making calls and suggesting solutions, she noticed something they didn't. Her sharp eyes caught a detail that everyone else had missed in their panic, something that might just save her brother. But would anyone listen to an 8-year-old's idea? The minutes ticked by like hours. The sun climbed higher, and the temperature continued to rise. Inside the car, Sonny's cries were getting weaker, and his movements were becoming slower. Their mother's calm facade was cracking, her voice breaking as she continued to talk to him through the window. The situation was reaching a critical point, and everyone knew it. Little did they know, the solution wasn't going to come from the approaching sirens, or the locksmiths on their way, or any of the adults trying so hard to help. It would come from a small girl whose love for her brother made her see what everyone else had missed. While everyone focused on the chaos around the car, Amara took a few steps back, her eyes carefully studying every inch of the vehicle. She might have been only 8, but she knew this car better than anyone except her mother. After all, this was where she'd spent countless hours playing I Spy with Sonny, where she taught him his favorite hand games, and where she always sat next to him during their family drives. Something caught her attention, something so simple that the adults, in their panic, had completely overlooked it. The rear window on the driver's side wasn't fully closed. There was a tiny gap, maybe no bigger than her thumb, where the window hadn't rolled all the way up. Her mother sometimes left it cracked like that when they parked at home, saying the car needed to breathe in the hot weather. Amara's heart started beating faster as she examined the gap. She remembered last summer, when she and her best friend had measured themselves against the car, marking their heights with chalk on the driveway. She was small for her age, something that usually bothered her when other kids teased her about it. But right now, being small might be exactly what they needed. Her eyes darted between the window gap and her brother. Sonny had stopped crying so loudly now, which somehow scared her more than his tears. His little face was flushed, and his movements were getting sluggish. Through the foggy windows, she could see him reaching weakly for his fallen stuffed giraffe. The adults around her continued their frantic efforts. Someone was arguing about whether breaking the window would hurt Sonny. Mrs. Chen was still on the phone, trying to find a locksmith who could come immediately. Their mother pressed her forehead against the car window, whispering prayers and promises to her baby boy. Amara took a deep breath and walked over to her mother, gently tugging on her sleeve. "Mama," she said softly, But her mother was too distressed to hear. She tugged again, harder this time. Mama, I see something. Her mother turned, tears streaming down her face. What is it, baby? The window. Amara pointed to the small gap. It's open a little bit. I think. She hesitated, then stood up straighter. I think I might be able to fit through. The adults fell silent, all eyes turning to the window gap Amara had spotted. Mr. Turner walked over, examining it closely. She's right, he said, surprise in his voice. There's a gap here, but it's mighty small. I'm small too, Amara said firmly, already walking toward the car. And I know how to unlock it. Sonny shows me all the time how he plays with the buttons when we're parked. Their mother's eyes widened with hope, but also fear. Baby, that's such a tight space. What if you get stuck? What if? But Amara stood her ground, something strong and determined in her young voice. Mama, Sonny needs help. I can do this. I'm his big sister. Mrs. Chen stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on their mother's shoulder. The child sees what we could not see. Sometimes the smallest heroes save the day. The crowd of neighbors moved closer, everyone realizing this might be their best chance. The distant sound of sirens still hadn't gotten any closer. The traffic accident was still blocking the quickest route to their street. Amara looked at her little brother through the window. Sonny had always depended on her, to help him reach things, to tie his shoes, to make him laugh when he was sad. Now he needed her more than ever, and she wasn't about to let him down. The summer heat pressed down on them all as they gathered around the car, holding their breath, watching as this brave little girl prepared to attempt what all the adults couldn't do. Sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places, or in this case, from the smallest member of the family who refused to give up on her baby brother. The small crowd of neighbors gathered closer as Mr. Turner carefully tested the window gap with his measuring tape. It's about 2 inches, he announced, looking at Amara with concern in his eyes. 2 inches seemed impossibly small, but to Amara, it looked like a doorway to save her brother. Their mother knelt beside Amara, holding her shoulders gently. Sweetie, are you absolutely sure about this? We can wait for the fire department. But one look at Sonny's increasingly tired face through the window made the decision clear. The little boy's eyes were drooping despite the heat, and that scared them more than anything. I can do it, Mama, Amara said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Remember when I crawled under the porch to rescue Mrs. Chen's cat last month? This is just like that. She didn't mention that she was actually pretty scared then too, but doing the right thing was more important than being afraid. Mrs. Chen brought over a kitchen stool she'd grabbed from her house. For reaching the window, she explained, setting it carefully beside the car. Mr. Turner stood ready to spot Amara, while another neighbor used an umbrella to shade the area where she would climb. Their mother wiped her tears and helped Amara take off her shoes. Okay, baby. But if you feel stuck or scared at any point, you tell us right away. Promise? Amara nodded, her small fingers crossed behind her back, not because she was lying, but because she knew she wouldn't give up no matter what. The plan was simple but scary. Amara would need to squeeze through the tiny gap head first, then somehow maneuver inside the car to reach the front seats where the keys were. Each adult had a different piece of advice. Take it slow and steady, said Mr. Turner. Remember to breathe, whispered Mrs. Chen. We're right here with you, assured their mother. Amara climbed onto the stool, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. The window gap looked even smaller up close. Inside, Sonny had perked up a little, watching his sister with curious eyes. He reached out toward her with one tiny hand, and that sight gave her all the courage she needed. She started with her head, turning it sideways like she'd seen cats do when exploring tight spaces. The edge of the window pressed against her ears, and for a moment she wondered if she'd made a mistake. But then she remembered something her teacher always said. Bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what's right even when you are scared. Inch by inch, she wiggled forward. The neighbors held their breath. Her shoulders were the hardest part. She had to turn them just so, moving one forward then the other, like threading an eel. The summer heat made everything sticky, but maybe that was actually helping her slide through. Their mother stood right beside her, one hand hovering near Amara's legs, ready to pull her back if needed. "You're doing great, baby," she encouraged, though her voice trembled. "Just like a little superhero." Time seemed to slow down as Amara squeezed through the gap. The car's interior felt like an oven, and she could now understand why everyone was so worried about Sunny. Sweat dripped down her face, but she kept going, thinking only of reaching her brother. The gathered neighbors watched in amazed silence as more and more of Amara disappeared into the car. Mrs. Chen had her hands clasped as if in prayer. Mr. Turner kept his arms ready to help. And their mother? She held her breath, her heart split between pride in her daughter's bravery and fear for both her children. Finally, after what seemed like forever, but was probably only a minute or two, Amara's feet disappeared through the window gap. She had made it inside. The first part of her rescue mission was complete, but the hardest part was still to come. Now she had to somehow make her way through the car's interior to reach those keys, all while fighting against the suffocating heat that had already affected her baby brother. Inside the car, the heat hit Amara like a wall. The air felt thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. She had landed awkwardly in the back seat, her small body twisted between Sunny's car seat and the door. The first thing she did was reach for her brother, touching his arm gently. "I'm here," she whispered, and his tired eyes lit up a little at the sound of her voice. Through the windows, she could see the worried faces of everyone watching. Her mother's hands were pressed against the glass, and even though Amara couldn't hear her words, she could read, "I love you," on her lips. The sight gave her strength as she began the tricky task of moving through the car's interior. The space between the front and back seats seemed much smaller than she remembered. Usually, this was where she passed snacks to Sunny or picked up toys he dropped. Now it felt like trying to squeeze through a tunnel. The running engine hummed around her, and the air conditioning was blowing warm air that didn't help much against the trapped heat. "Almost there, Sunny," she said, more to keep herself brave than for him. Her brother watched her with drowsy eyes, his curls damp with sweat. She paused to pick up his favorite stuffed giraffe from the floor and tuck it next to him. His small smile was worth every second of discomfort. Moving forward was like solving a puzzle with her own body. She had to twist just right, using the headdress to pull herself along. Her shirt stuck to her back with sweat, and her arms trembled a little from the effort. But each inch forward was an inch closer to those keys dangling from the ignition. Outside, she could hear muffled voices giving encouragement. Mr. Turner's deep voice, Mrs. Chen's gentle tones, and above all, her mother's words of support filtered through the glass. The sound of distant sirens seemed closer now, but Amara knew she couldn't wait for them. Sunny needed help right now. As she wiggled between the seats, she remembered all the times she'd helped Sunny learn new things. How to build block towers, how to blow bubbles, how to make silly faces. Now she was helping him in the most important way ever, and that thought made her feel stronger. The front seats loomed above her like mountains. She had to be extra careful now. One wrong move could bump the gear shift or hit the steering wheel. The keys seemed so close yet so far, hanging there and glinting in the sunlight that streamed through the windshield. Sweat dripped into her eyes, making them sting, but she couldn't spare a hand to wipe it away. Every movement had to count. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she stretched forward, reaching with everything she had. Her fingertips brushed against the keys, but she needed to get just a little bit closer. Through the windshield, she saw Mrs. Chen covering her mouth with her hands, Mr. Turner leaning forward as if his own body could help her reach, and her mother's eyes fixed on her every move. The whole neighborhood seemed to be holding its breath. With one final stretch that made her muscles burn, Amara's fingers wrapped around the key ring. The metal felt hot against her skin, but she held on tight. This was it, the moment everything depended on. She had to press the unlock button without dropping the keys or losing her balance in the cramped space. Time seemed to stand still as she carefully moved her thumb over the key fob. She could feel the small ridges of the unlock button under her finger. Sunny made a soft sound behind her, and that tiny reminder of why she was doing this gave her the final push she needed. The sound of the car doors unlocking was the sweetest thing Amara had ever heard. It was like music, a simple click that changed everything. Through the windows, she saw the entire crowd of neighbors break into smiles and tears of relief. Her mother was already rushing to open the back door to reach Sunny. But Amara's job wasn't quite done yet. She still had to get herself back out of this tight space, though now, with the doors unlocked and help on the way, the hard part was over. Or at least, that's what she thought until she tried to move again in the sweltering heat of the car's interior. The moment the locks clicked open, everything burst into action. Their mother flung open the back door, letting in a rush of fresh air that felt like heaven to Amara. Cool breeze swept through the hot car, and she could hear everyone's voices clearly now instead of muffled through the glass. "My babies," their mother cried, reaching first for Sunny, who was still strapped in his car seat. Her hands shook as she unbuckled him, pulling him close to her chest. His little face was red and sweaty, but as soon as the fresh air hit him, he started to perk up. Mrs. Chen was already there with a cold water bottle and a damp cloth. But Amara was still stuck awkwardly between the front seats, her muscles trembling from holding the uncomfortable position for so long. The heat had zapped her energy, and now that the emergency was over, she realized just how tired she felt. Mr. Turner reached through the front door, his strong hands gentle as he helped guide her back. "Easy does it, young lady," he said softly. "Take your time. You've done the hard part already." Other neighbors crowded around, offering water and help, but giving enough space for their mother to reach Amara too. Finally free from the cramped space, Amara practically tumbled into her mother's waiting arms. Their mother held both her children tight, tears streaming down her face. "My brave girl," she whispered into Amara's hair. "My amazing, wonderful, brave girl." Sunny, squished between them in the group hug, had already bounced back as only toddlers can. He reached for Amara's nose with his chubby fingers, a game they often played. "Sissy safe," he announced proudly, making everyone laugh through their tears. Mrs. Chen appeared with her garden umbrella, shielding them from the hot sun as they sat on the curb. Someone had brought over cold drinks and wet towels. The whole neighborhood fussed over them. One neighbor fanned them with a magazine, another offered snacks, and Mr. Turner kept a protective watch over the little family. In the distance, sirens grew louder. Help was finally arriving. But thanks to Amara's quick thinking and bravery, they didn't need emergency services anymore. Still, their mother insisted both children get checked out, just to be safe. The paramedics arrived in their big ambulance, lights flashing. They checked Sunny first, praising how well he'd handled the scary situation. When they turned to examine Amara, they couldn't help but smile at her story. "You know what?" said the kind-faced paramedic as she checked Amara's temperature. "I've been doing this job for 15 years, and I've never met a braver 8-year-old. You kept your cool when grown-ups were panicking. That's pretty special." Their mother hadn't let go either child, keeping one hand on each of them as the paramedics worked. The fear was still fresh in her eyes, but pride shone through even stronger. She kept kissing their foreheads, whispering thank yous, to Amara, to the neighbors, to anyone who would listen. The police officers who arrived took notes about what happened, but they too were amazed by Amara's courage. One officer knelt down to her level and said, "You know, we have a special award at the station for young heroes. I think we just found our next recipient." But Amara wasn't thinking about awards or praise. She was watching Sunny, who had completely recovered and was now showing off his stuffed giraffe to the paramedics. Her little brother was safe. That was all that mattered to her. When he caught her looking at him, he gave her his biggest, sunniest smile, the one that had earned him his nickname. The excitement began to die down as emergency vehicles departed and neighbors slowly returned to their homes. But something had changed in their little community. Everyone had witnessed something extraordinary. Not just a rescue, but the pure love of a sister for her brother, the kind of love that makes ordinary children find extraordinary courage when it matters most. That evening, their home was filled with a different kind of energy. The scary morning felt like a distant dream, but its impact lingered in the gentle ways their mother kept checking on both children, in the extra tight hugs, and in the special dinner she prepared to celebrate her little hero. The smell of Amara's favorite spaghetti and meatballs filled the kitchen. Their mother had let her help stir the sauce, something she usually said Amara was too young to do. But today was different. Today, Amara had proved she was capable of so much more than anyone had imagined. Sonny sat in his high chair, happily making a mess with his food, showing no signs of the morning's ordeal. Every few minutes, he would look at Amara and beam, as if he understood that his big sister had done something extraordinary for him. "Sissy," he would call out randomly, reaching for her with sauce-covered hands. The phone hadn't stopped ringing all afternoon. Relatives, friends, and neighbors called to check on them and praise Amara's bravery. Their mother's eyes would fill with tears every time she retold the story, pulling both children closer as she spoke. "You know," their mother said as she helped Amara twirl spaghetti on her fork, "when I was pregnant with Sonny, I worried about how you'd feel about being a big sister. Some kids get jealous or upset." She paused, wiping away a tear. "But you've been amazing from day one. Today just proved what I already knew. You're the best big sister anyone could ask for." As they ate, a gentle knock came at the door. It was Mrs. Chen, holding a homemade chocolate cake decorated with wobbly frosting stars. "For our neighborhood hero," she announced, setting it on the counter. Behind her, Mr. Turner appeared with his toolbox. "Hope you don't mind," he said, holding up a small device. "I brought over a spare electronic key fob. Thought I could program it for you right now, just in case." Their mother hugged him, understanding the thoughtful gesture. No one wanted to take any chances after today. While Mr. Turner worked on the spare key, Mrs. Chen sat with them, sharing stories about her own childhood in another country, where she too had looked after her younger siblings. "Sometimes the smallest people have the biggest hearts," she said, watching Amara help Sonny with his sippy cup. The evening news van had tried to come by earlier, wanting to interview the heroic 8-year-old, but their mother had politely turned them away. This was a time for family, for processing what had happened, for being thankful. Besides, real heroes don't need television cameras. They just do what needs to be done when someone they love needs help. After dinner, their mother broke their usual routine. Instead of separate bedtimes, she let Amara and Sonny snuggle together on the couch, watching their favorite cartoon. She didn't even mind when Sonny fell asleep on Amara's lap, drooling slightly on her favorite pajama shirt. The chocolate cake sat half-eaten on the coffee table, its frosting stars melting a little in the warmth of their home. Their mother had taken dozens of pictures throughout the evening, of Amara and Sonny sharing cake, of them cuddling on the couch, of simple moments that meant everything after such a scary day. As the evening wound down, their mother gathered them both in her arms for what felt like the 100th hug of the day. "How about we all sleep in Mama's big bed tonight?" she suggested, something she usually only allowed during thunderstorms. Amara nodded sleepily, already half carrying her little brother. The day's excitement had worn her out, but she felt different somehow, stronger, more confident. She had discovered something about herself today, that being small didn't mean being helpless, that love could make you brave, and that sometimes the scariest moments bring out the best in people. As they curled up together in their mother's big bed, Sonny automatically reached for Amara's hand in his sleep, a habit he had since he was tiny. Their mother wrapped her arms around both of them, humming softly. The night was peaceful, but none of them took it for granted anymore. They knew now, more than ever, how precious these simple moments together really were. A week after the incident, their small neighborhood had changed in subtle but meaningful ways. Neighbors who once just waved in passing now stopped to chat. Mrs. Chen had started a neighborhood watch group with special attention to children's safety. Mr. Turner had become their unofficial car safety inspector, checking everyone's locks and offering spare keys. The local fire station had invited Amara to visit, wanting to honor her quick thinking and bravery. She stood shyly in front of the fire truck, wearing a too-big fire hat, as the fire chief knelt down to present her with a special Young Hero certificate. Sonny clapped his hands excitedly, not fully understanding the ceremony, but happy to see his sister being celebrated. "You know what impressed us most," the fire chief said, his kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "It wasn't just your bravery. It was how you stayed calm and noticed something all the adults missed. That's what real heroes do. They observe, they think, and then they act." Their mother caught every moment on her phone's camera, though her hands shook a little when the firefighters demonstrated proper car safety techniques. She'd have become extra cautious since that day, always double-checking the keys before closing any door. But she had also become more confident in her daughter's capabilities. At school, Amara's teacher had asked her to share her story during their weekly circle time. Usually quiet in class, Amara surprised everyone by speaking clearly and confidently. "I was scared," she admitted to her classmates, "but being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave. It just means you care about something more than you care about being scared." Her words had touched something in her classmates. Kids who had never talked to her before started including her at recess. Some even shared their own stories of taking care of younger siblings. The school counselor told their mother that Amara had inspired other students to believe in themselves. One morning, they found a small package on their doorstep. Inside was a custom-made t-shirt for Sonny that read, "My sister is my hero," and one for Amara that said, "Little sister, big hero." They wore them proudly to the local park, where other parents would stop their mother to talk about car safety and emergency preparedness. The local elementary school had even invited Amara to help create a safety awareness program for other kids. She worked with her teachers to develop simple rhymes and songs about what to do in emergencies. "Stay calm, think clear, help is near" became a popular chant in the kindergarten classes. But the most significant change was at home. Their mother had started having regular safety practice sessions, turning them into games that Sonny loved. They practiced remembering important phone numbers through silly songs and learned their address by making up a dance. Even their bedtime routine now included a moment where they all shared one thing they were grateful for about each other. Sonny had become even more attached to his big sister, if that was possible. He would toddle after her around the house, attempting to copy everything she did. Sometimes at night, he would pat her face and say, "My hero sissy," words that meant more than any official certificate ever could. Their story had spread through the community, inspiring other families to have important conversations about safety and bravery. But for Amara, the biggest lesson wasn't about being a hero. It was about the power of love and family. She learned that sometimes the scariest moments can bring out strength you never knew you had. One quiet evening, as their mother tucked them into bed, she asked Amara if she felt different after everything that had happened. Amara thought for a moment, looking at her little brother already asleep with his stuffed giraffe. "I don't feel different," she said softly. "I just feel more like me. Because taking care of Sonny, that's who I am. I'm his big sister." Their mother smiled, understanding that sometimes the most profound truths come from the simplest words. The incident that could have ended in tragedy had instead become a story of hope, courage, and the incredible strength of a sister's love. In their neighborhood, people still talk about that hot summer day when a little girl proved that heroes come in all sizes, and that the biggest acts of bravery often come from the smallest hearts.